Google shut me down for promoting a health conference. They said I can't advertise about health. I appealed it and they shut me down twice because they said education is fine.
Today, we're joined by Sandy Martin, the founder of the Biohacker Expo. With her passion for health innovation and wellness,
Sandy is transforming how we think about biohacking. Let's dive in.
Someone who wants to do some functional medicine or biohacking, they should seek a coach.
I think wellness coaches are probably very helpful. Every time you hear biohacking in the media, they always describe it as something self-experimental, and that's not what's happening. You get people in regular news media saying, this is all experimental and not FDA approved. Vitamin D supplementation is not experimental.
Right.
Right?
No one should be getting exposed to toxic food. It's unacceptable.
Or microplastics, or phthalates in our perfumes and our shampoos. I realized 2 months ago that my shampoo have phthalates in it.
How you actually got involved in the whole biohacking space.
I got involved because
Welcome to another episode of a Healthy Point of View podcast. I'm your host, Sam Tejada. Today we have a guest. This is someone that I got to meet many years ago, and now she's doing some really big things in the biohacking space. This is the founder of one of the beautiful big conferences right here in our backyard in Miami. It's called the Biohacker Expo. And last year, she had this tremendous lineup. I was on stage. I had the ability to talk about franchising opportunities in the biohacking space. And then also, my business partner, Dr. Davis, was up there talking about environmental toxins. This year, he's going to be on that stage again. Today, we have Sandy Martin.
Thanks.
Sandy.
Thanks so much.
Yeah,
for having
welcome.
me.
I'm happy to have you here.
I'm so thrilled.
Especially, we got the Biohacker Expo coming up, and it's exciting. I keep on hearing people talking about it. You're posting things with people that are going to be on stage talking. And last year, you had a tremendous lineup. This upcoming year, it's going to be even a better lineup. So let's talk about it.
Well, I believe that laughter is the best medicine. And so I booked a comedian to host the main stage for 2 days, and that's JP Sears. And so a lot of the posts you're seeing are me making fun of biohacking, because if we can't make fun of ourselves, then, what's the point?
I agree. And I've been following him for a while, especially with all the political stuff that's happening. He just cracks me up.
Me too.
It's sometimes I'm just like, and this might be TMI, I'm like, I hope I'm sitting on the toilet when I'm watching this stuff, because then at least I won't shit my pants. Right? So, but this is going to be great. I think everyone's going to be there having a great time. You and I talked about having the IV lounge.
Yes.
Right?
I'm really excited for this, because the one thing I hate about getting an IV at an event is that I miss out on things. And so it's usually happening in a booth. And then I have to take an hour or half an hour, whatever kind of drip I'm getting. And it's downtime, which is lovely, but I try to pack as much stuff as I can in. But this year we're putting the lounge right behind the seats for the main stage. So people will be able to watch the main stage talks while they're getting a drip. And I think it's just going to add to the overall vibe.
Yeah, that's the experience, because last year we had a booth doing the IVs, and we did a lot of IVs. But this year it's going to be different, because you're right. A lot of people, they don't want to miss out. So they're like, well, there's this talk, maybe I'll do it later. And now it's going to be just like front and center, like right back there in front of the whole audience and stage. So this is going to be exciting. Exciting.
Yeah.
So what does this lineup look like this year?
Well, the other thing I'm really excited about is dealing with what I see as the confusion behind what it means to be FDA approved and FDA cleared. And so a lot of what we do in the biohacking space it sounds wishy-washy. It may support your immune system. This may help your pain. This has not been approved to treat disease, blah, 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 whatever. And when regular consumers read those labels, they frankly think biohacking is bullshit.
Right.
And so what I've done is I've booked Andrew Bustamante, who created Everyday Spy, to teach he's a former CIA operative, and he's coming to teach us what it means to have a covert conversation about this world. So, everything that's out there is FDA cleared, but you get people in regular news media saying, this is all experimental and not FDA approved. Well, it's, vitamin D supplementation is not experimental.
Right.
Right? But they still have to put those kinds of labels on a vitamin D bottle. And red light therapy has been around for over 40 years
Right.
as a therapy. It's not experimental. But they can't say exactly what red light therapy does, because if they went through what it would take, they'd have to pay off the FDA millions of dollars to review clinical studies that would cost millions of dollars. And so
Right.
the only one who gets the label FDA approved are companies who can patent and protect their IP, and so they can charge really high profits.
Right. It's like vitamin D, right? It's even if you try to, put the studies behind vitamin D, the millions of dollars that you spend on that, you're never going to get it back as an investor because you can't patent vitamin D, right?
Right.
So I get it. I get it. And this is so
And
he's going to be talking about this
he's
stuff.
going to talk about what it means as exhibitors and vendors of these products to communicate clearly to an audience that understands also how to interpret the language. Like, we're going to
Okay.
create our own covert language
That's amazing.
for how to handle this, or at least interpret what's out there.
Okay.
And what's funny is I asked ChatGPT for help on that, and it said it wouldn't help me create a covert language.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, they have it. They're policing it. That's
Yeah.
what they're doing.
Yeah.
That's scary. So, okay. So this is going to be like a class.
It'll be a talk, but I think it's one of these enlightening moments where we can recognize we're all in this together. We can really talk about the safety and efficacy of biohacking. Like, some things don't work,
Yeah.
right? But it's not necessarily because of the thing. I started my biohacking journey with light therapy on my brain, and it didn't work. But it didn't work because my body was loaded with mold.
Right.
And so I had to detox first. And so we have to get to a point where we understand the context for when to use something and when not to. And so, I spent a lot of money on that device. If I had known originally what was wrong with me, if I had known where to go for testing for all kinds of things, then I would have figured it out sooner and could have afforded a much less expensive journey.
Yeah, yeah. So the one thing that I've noticed in the world of like functional medicine and biohacking, because I've been in this industry. I started part time when I was in the fire department with a company called Censorship, and I've been in this industry for almost 2 decades. And what it was almost 20 years ago, it's definitely not what it is today.
Yeah.
And today, it's like you got some of the like who's that are like all in this stuff. So now people are like more willing to accept it. I mean, you got the RFK Jr., movement that's going on, Make America Healthy Again.
Yeah.
What do you think about that, by the way?
I love it. I was just watching a video on my phone of the people lined up in the Capitol building
A
to
lot.
support him
Oh yeah.
at the hearing. I think he's kooky. I think he's really weird. But I'm not going to judge someone based on how weird they are. I mean, I'm pretty weird sometimes myself. So
We all are.
yeah, I mean, that's part of what makes life fun. But he's supporting an agenda, that he's leading a movement,
Right.
really, where we're able to talk about the money that's corrupting healthcare. We're
Right.
able to talk about, why doctors are not recommending lifestyle changes when they can.
Right.
Or can they? Are they restricted by the insurance companies from even recommending these things? Why is the cash pay model so vital right now as a pivot point?
Yeah.
It's something that won't always be that way. It won't always be cash pay. I hope that we can get these therapies like what Liquivita offers. But it's demonstrating, people are willing to vote with their dollars.
Yeah.
And if enough people vote with their dollars, their hard-earned dollars, paying out of pocket to be healthy, like that's what it takes, because the rest of it's just sick care.
Yeah, it is. And that's the thing. People have to take more of that proactive, preventative approach to their health and wellness. But another thing that he's talking about is this whole toxic food, the
Oh.
big food companies. And for me, it's like it doesn't matter if you're on the left or on the right. We all should be supporting that movement. Like none of us, the children, no one should be getting exposed to toxic food. It's unacceptable.
Or microplastics or phthalates in
Mhm.
our perfumes and our shampoos. I am really careful about these things. And I realized 2 months ago, just didn't consider that my shampoo from Whole Foods would have phthalates in it.
Really?
And then I was like, why does this smell so good? And I finally looked at the bottle, and it was clear that it had
Really?
phthalates.
Wow.
And so I had to throw that away.
You think companies like Whole Foods, they vet out the majority of the products. I thought they vet out all of their products. No.
It's not
Huh?
one of their criterion.
Wow. Wow. So I guess you threw that shampoo out.
I did.
All
It
right, good.
smelled so good.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
how you
yeah.
know. Like if something smells really good, check the label
Yeah, check the
twice.
label. It's like all those things that you plug in the wall and stuff too. Like you don't know what you're breathing
Ooh,
in.
yeah, I can't handle
And,
that
and if
stuff.
you breathe it in, I mean, it's going into your lungs, it's diffusing through the blood, it's getting in your bloodstream. People have to understand that. It's not just you're breathing it and breathing it back out. Like when you breathe something in, it's going into your lungs, and what happens is deoxygenated blood, the dirty blood is going through the lungs, and it's getting oxygenated again with whatever you breathe. So it's going into your bloodstream. So you have to be careful. So now, Sandy, I want to talk about how you even got into because before you used to do different type of conferences,
I did. I
right?
ran Comic Cons.
Comic Cons.
Florida SuperCon in South Florida was the big one.
Okay, awesome. Which is different. This is the two whole different industries.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about like how you actually got involved in the whole biohacking space.
I got involved because I had to remake my life after I recovered from having a brain injury caused by mold. And what happened to me in that process from that injury was the, I believe the mold went to the most active part of my brain, so the analytical driven, operational, hardcore boss bitch got real quiet.
Mm.
And so everything I knew to be me went away.
How long did it take for you to like notice that?
It took 2 to 4 weeks for me to know I was gone.
Something's up.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it was likely because I was painting in an area that where mold was behind the walls, that the VOCs from the paint fumes acted as a carrier to get it straight into my brain.
Oh wow.
And so we have to be really careful about our environment. And so it took 6 months to figure out what was wrong with I had a that's meeting you is part of my story, and Liquid Vita is a huge part of my recovery. So a friend of mine recommended that I do a heavy metals test because he thought it could be arsenic poisoning. That's how sick I was. I
Oh
couldn't
wow.
stay awake past 7. My cognition was just kaput. It was gone, and couldn't do anything sequential. I was freezing. Just I called it buffering. It would just stop and not know how long I was frozen. I couldn't work on sentence structure really without pausing and taking a
Really?
long time to really think about my words. Anything sequential was just quiet. And so this recommendation that I take a, a heavy metals test at home, I didn't know at the time that crab cakes have a natural arsenic. Natural, I mean, is I guess
Hmm.
arsenic comes from the earth. They say it's non-toxic. I don't know, but I ate a crab cake. I took activated charcoal, and then I peed in a cup, sent that off. So the charcoal pulled all of the arsenic that was from that crab cake out. What happened was the lab, not the company that sold me the test, but the lab between me and them, called me on the phone and said, "I'm not supposed to call you." Well, that's scary. You have
Wow.
so much arsenic in your body, you might just die.
Oh geez.
And so that's when my friend said, "Oh, you have to go to Liquid Vita. You have to get chelation straight away." And then he connected me to you. You were so kind and so helpful. And I was out of my mind. Like, I thought I was dying. I took a
Wow.
jog the day before, a light jog, and then I thought I was dying the next day.
Yeah.
And and so thankfully, you took blood tests before I started chelation, but you got me in same day, and we got those results turned around, sent to you, and you said, "Okay, let's do this. Help me out." I did 2 drips and then found out I wasn't really poisoned,
Wow.
and I wouldn't have known that if it wasn't for the extensive blood testing you do.
Right.
Just
Right.
standard protocol for what you do here.
And the thing is that what people have to also understand is like one thing can show up in your blood work, but it doesn't mean that there aren't other things that have to be addressed. And that's where like the comprehensive blood analysis and doing the specialty test, micronutrients deficiency, mold testing, and all of that stuff. Because when you were feeling the way that you were feeling, I mean, how frustrating was it throughout that whole time until you got better?
Well, I mean, I saw a neurologist straight away, and he misdiagnosed me.
What did he misdiagnose you with?
So he said I had a traumatic brain injury from a bump on my head when I was 10.
What?
That the
Really?
symptoms just, he sees it all the time, he said. And they just come back to haunt people. Just midlife, you'll just suddenly have confusion from an early childhood bump to the head.
When he told
And
you that, did you already know in your head, like, there's no way?
I knew that that wasn't the case, but he sent me for a SPECT scan.
Okay.
I was one of those people that it was during COVID. It was October of 2020, and I was a person who watched MSNBC. And so I thought that the world was ending. I was afraid to get on a plane and go to Dr. Amen's clinic in Atlanta. He didn't have a clinic down here yet.
Mm,
And so I didn't go get the proper scan. I thought I was being clever. I found someone locally who would do a SPECT scan, and I thought I was going to get the help I need.
right.
And so what happened was that the clinic or diagnostic place where they did the scan, they put me in a dark room, had me lie down on a table, 15 minutes to wait. I closed my eyes and meditated because I was bored. So that SPECT scan showed low activity in my frontal lobe because I was meditating, and low activity in the back of my head because I had my eyes closed. So it looked like I had had a traumatic brain.
Mm,
And so he's like, it's obvious, it's on your scan. And so he recommended hyperbaric oxygen therapy, neurofeedback, and a drug called nimodipine. And it off-label, he said. And he said it's used for stroke victims to open up the blood vessels in the brain. That seemed really aggressive to me, but I was scared and desperate, and I didn't know what to do.
you did the hyperbaric? I would assume the hyperbaric couldn't hurt. I would only be able to benefit, right?
Except that it gave me headaches.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
This was one of those like industrial hospital hyperbarics?
So I went to a clinic down the road, and I
Okay.
met with one of the doctors there. He is what put me on the course of biohacking. So he
Okay.
asked me what the protocol was that was recommended. And when I told him, he said, "Oh, Dr. So-and-so? Like, how do you know that?" He said, "Well, he's the only one that recommends that drug."
Oh, wow.
And so this doctor recommended mild hyperbaric therapy because if you do 2.0, it can be with pure oxygen. It can actually do more harm than good to the brain. So you want a really slow, gentle approach for the brain.
Okay.
And I bought one. I bought a chamber. It couldn't get into my home. It was too big, so we put it in the office.
It was
I
one of
did
those
that.
soft shell or the hard
I
shell?
actually got a hard shell
Oh, wow.
1.5 ATA chamber.
You
I
said,
was,
forget it, but I got to get my health right. I'm doing the real deal.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it was only 7,000 more than the therapy was going to be.
Right. Right.
And so I said, if we're going to do this, we're going to do this. I'll pay the extra 7,000, and then it's available to my friends
Right.
and my then husband. And so we got a chamber. But immediately I had a Herx response to it because mold will fight back. And so the headaches were so intense, I couldn't even use this really fantastic therapy until I found out what was wrong with me, detoxed, and got better. And so we found out it wasn't arsenic, and then I was like, that was maybe 4 months in out of the 6 months. And I was listening to one of Dave Asprey's books, and he described one of his scans from Dr. Amen as looking like he'd had toxic exposure. They figured out for him it was mold. And then I went back to my scans, and I had a similar scan.
Okay.
And I thought, okay, I'll test for mold. And then found out that was the case, was able to start detoxing. But then it took me 6 months before I felt well enough to just be a regular person for a whole day.
Yeah.
You know,
And
nothing
Dave Asprey's big
extraneous.
on the whole mold thing,
He
and
is,
he
yeah.
even like, his coffee that he has, the Danger Coffee. It's all about
Mold-free.
mold-free. So what did he do to detox from the mold?
So the first doctor I found, it took me a month to see her, and I read all of the protocols for how to detox from mold before I saw her, and she recommended something that wasn't on the protocol. But I was this time I was actually desperate, and I didn't take the nimodipine, but she recommended nystatin, and I took that. I was like, whatever, I'll take anything. I'm desperate.
Right. Right.
And then I had a Herx response again, but massive to that.
Oh, wow.
And so I had suicidal thoughts for the only 4 days of my entire life. And that's just mold doesn't care if you live or die. It feeds off of us living or dead. It
Right.
doesn't care. And so
That's crazy.
it got in and just started to shoot off signals like, oh no, oh no. I just imagine the mold in my brain just firing off these signals, you know, get her to stop, whatever it takes. Thankfully, when I looked in the cabinet the next morning to take that pill, I was like, oh, you're new. And so I called her and I said, I can't take this drug. And she said, I told you you would need mental health help to get through this process. And I was like, no, no, no.
Oh,
That's not how we do this. You don't give me a drug that makes me think of drowning myself in a tub. That's a thought that's not mine.
right.
That's coming from this thing that's taken up property inside my head.
Yeah.
It's an actual living thing, fungus. And it had taken hold of me. It had created my thoughts. Those weren't my thoughts. I'm not going to go talk to somebody about that thought. It's not mine.
Right.
And so I had to fire her and find another doctor.
No, because can you just imagine all of a sudden now you're seeing this therapist, right? Where now they're going to label you as potentially crazy.
Sure.
They're going to give you other medications that are going to actually truly make you crazy. And the root cause, which is the mold, still hasn't been taken care of. Yeah. So you made a good choice.
Yeah. So I found another doctor who took me for $13,000 day one. And that's how desperate I was.
Wow.
I didn't know where to turn, didn't know what to do, but he was the #1 mold doctor in South Florida.
Okay.
And then what I found out was that he wanted to test me for everything because the cash pay model is that he's incentivized to take advantage of my weakness when I'm the weakest. I had to sign a form saying I wouldn't be rude to his staff and I wouldn't question his judgment because mold rage is a thing. And so he'd just seen it so many times. So he automatically put me in this submissive role where I had to agree to just do whatever he said
Wow.
out of the gate. It took me 2 months to realize that that was nonsense. Once I had to fire my second functional medicine doctor, I realized I just had to do it on my own. And so what got me healthy were, because I'd had that over response, so I knew I had to go gentle. So a lot of chia seeds. Every time I drank water, it had chia seeds in it. And so that would help to bind the mold and get it out of my body. And then chlorella at night is more gentle than activated charcoal. I would do
Okay.
activated charcoal a couple times a week, but chlorella every night really helped. So that's how I helped my body get rid of it. I had to move out of the moldy environment.
Right. So you don't keep on getting exposed to it.
Right. I mean, that's the most important thing. Our bodies, most people, 70% of people can clear whatever toxins are sent their way.
Right. Right.
It's going to do damage.
Yeah.
But we're in this constant filtration process in our bodies. That's what the liver does.
Right.
And so I had to get out of the environment. I aided the liver through gentle binders. And then I was doing some mitochondrial support, supplements, CoQ10 and PQQ and, oh goodness, I don't remember.
Glutathione?
Well, that's where I kept coming back to Liquivita.
Yeah.
I didn't supplement for that. I think I took an NAC supplement,
Okay.
but I kept coming to Liquivita for the glutathione drips.
Right.
And I
That
was
helps. I
doing
mean,
that.
yeah.
Like every other week in the beginning, and then about once a month
Yeah.
thereafter.
Yeah. That's it's so interesting because I hear a lot of stories of people going through similar processes, right, with their health. And until you actually, I had someone else on the podcast, Natalie Lefebvre.
Needham? Oh.
And Natalie Lefebvre, she talks publicly about how you have to become the CEO of your health, and you got to take control because there's people out there to guide you, but everyone has like a different way, and it might not be the way for you. And listening to your story, it wasn't until you actually decided, you know what, I just got to roll up my sleeves and do this myself. I got to start reading. I got to start looking into this, picking people's brains. And now look at you. It's
Thank
like
you.
everyone in the biohacking space knows who Sandy is. You went from
Just
being a patient
unbelievable.
who's trying to just get better, where now it's just like you're helping millions of people now. Being part of all of this. I saw you at the A4M. We were at the premier red carpet event together. And it's just like we're actually bringing it to the world.
And so how that transition happened was I got divorced and I realized I had to go back to work. And I had been helping my ex-husband with the Comic-Cons a
Okay.
little bit here and there, but really hadn't worked in 2 years. And I was going to, in the lead up, I had started playing gongs. So that was part of my healing, was sound therapy. And I was going to run a metaphysical event because I was just kind of all wrapped up in the mystical way that frequencies had also helped me heal. And then we were talking to a lawyer, and the lawyer asked him how I was different before and after the mold. And he said, well, before she was a real boss bitch, and now she sits in a corner and plays gongs. It's like, that's not who I am.
Wow.
And I called him that night and I said, I need you to help me think this through because you know me better than anyone else. That's not me. What do I do? And he said, well, why do you like the gongs so much? And I said, well, they're biohacking. He goes, what do you mean they're biohacking? And I explained the science behind low frequency tones in that 30 to 50 hertz range and how it shook the mold out of my brain, helped drain it through my cerebral spinal fluid. It's a lymphatic massage to
Right.
have sound go through the body, especially in those frequencies. And I was working with gongs in that frequency range intentionally to create movement and to help my body detox. And I explained that to him and he said, well, then do that. What do you mean do that? He goes, do biohacking. What do you mean? He goes, do a biohacking event. He had to hit me over the head with it. And I went, oh, is that a thing? I had no idea. I'd never been to any sort of health expo, let alone a biohacking event. And we
Wow.
had just come out of COVID, so events were not really a thing. I
Right.
think even Dave Asprey's event was virtual that year.
Yeah.
And so I looked it up. Within 2 weeks, I had a brand. If there's anything I know how to do, it's I know how to run an event. And I just applied all of that structural and operational knowledge into something that I'm truly passionate about. And I know that my content is reaching millions of people.
Oh yeah.
And so we'll have 1,500 attendees at the event. But I know that the work I'm doing is affecting people all over the world who come in contact with the message. And to me, that's the whole reason to do any of this.
Yeah. And I actually remember when you did the first conference, and it was actually Thanksgiving that I saw an ad on Facebook, and it was after having a crazy big meal on Thanksgiving. And I was like, what is this Biohacker Expo? You know, like, this is my industry. I've never even heard of this. And I wrote an email, and you wrote back, and you said, hey, I actually know you. I was like, what? And you know, then we connected, and then
Yeah.
you know, everything kind of came to fruition. The relationship, you know, further enhanced itself, and you know, got on stage, talked, and we had the IV lounge there. So yeah, it's
Isn't that so typical of founders? That we had that exchange on Thanksgiving. You wrote it on Thanksgiving, and I replied on Thanksgiving.
Oh yeah,
Like, we don't have time
we
to
work around the
waste.
clock,
Right.
you know. And I tell people, it's like, honestly, like if I'm up and my eyes are open, I'm typically working. And you know, I understand the whole work-life balance thing, but for me, it's just like I work around the clock, 24/7.
That's because you're on a mission.
I am. And that mission is to really help as many people as possible. And that's why I was a firefighter, but I wasn't fulfilled. I knew that I could do more than just taking people to this traditional hospital system that kept me going back and picking them up and taking them back every other week. You know, so I told myself, this can't just be happening. God's not going to use me to just feed this system. God's going to use me to actually help people. You know, and that's my goal now. So, but yeah, we work on most awkward days and times, and you know, look at us now. Years later, we're here on the podcast talking about it and sharing this information with the world.
It really blows my mind to be able to go from dependent on your kindness for survival to being able to sit across from you and share my story in a way that will help other people realize that they can feel good.
Right.
People are walking around with the aches, they're sluggish, brain fog is just considered normal. Once we reach, I was 45 when all this happened. Do you know how easy, I'm sure you know, how easy it would have been to just call me, you know, perimenopausal?
Oh, it's part of life. You're getting old, and people just accept it. People listen to it. It's like, oh, yeah, I'm just getting old. And then they tell you, don't get old, you know, because you're going to get crippled like me. It's like, no, like, there's stuff inside of your system that you need to take care of.
Right.
It's not just because you're getting old. Your body's supposed to be able to handle this aging process, but all the toxins around it in our environment and our foods and everything else. And listen, even if your hormones are out of whack, there's things that you can do to balance out your hormones still.
Yeah, even without supplementation,
Right.
right? Like that can be done with just the right advice,
Mm-hmm.
or even the hormones are off because of endocrine disruptors or because of mold or because of, we have to
Right.
take care of those root cause issues. You mentioned biohacking and functional medicine in the same sentence earlier, and I want to say what I think is the difference between the two, because I think people will sometimes think they're similar.
Right.
Biohacking is really about feeling good now. I want to think clearly. I want to have energy. I want to be accomplished in my day to day. And I want to repeat that tomorrow and the next day and the next day.
Right.
And so biohacking tools are energizing and they give us a sense of vitality in the present.
Right.
And I think functional medicine differs in that it is going to the past to look at the root cause of why we might not be feeling great in the moment so that we can feel better in the future.
I agree with that. And for me, when I hear functional medicine, I start thinking about a lot of testing, right? A lot of specialty testing and looking at genetics, epigenetics, looking at toxins, biohacking, kind of exactly what you said. I think about having certain modalities and technologies so you can feel better, like now, like a cold plunge, infrared, sauna, red light therapy, um, brain tap, guided meditation. Those are things that are like people should be doing every single day. But even if you biohack, you can still benefit from functional medicine and having a good functional medicine practitioner who can take that deep dive to make sure that the biohacking technologies that you're utilizing are working.
Right, because they didn't work for me
Right.
until I got to the root.
Right.
So I wasn't going to get there on biohacking alone. And even I think it's considered biohacking to do an at-home test for heavy metals, right?
Right.
Like that's something a biohacker does, is to test and measure at home. But that sent me down the wrong path. And
Yeah.
had I really thought that that was a reliable test for my situation, without the context of a doctor telling me that the other ways you get exposed to arsenic other than being poisoned by somebody is from crab, I wouldn't have known.
Wow.
It took a smart person to help me think through that process. I could not do that on my own.
Yeah.
And we definitely need both. But I think that if people don't know where to start, because sometimes not at Liquivita, but at other places, functional medicine is really expensive to get started.
Very, very expensive.
And so if someone doesn't want to outlay that kind of money and they don't have access to one of your clinics, if they start with something that's biohacking, my advice is just to say, that's cool. That's great stuff. But if it doesn't make you feel better, you got to dig deeper.
Yeah. So in your opinion, would you say someone who wants to do some functional medicine or biohacking, they should seek a coach to guide them through the process?
I think wellness coaches are probably very helpful. Our mutual friend coached me through the process. Had I not had him, I wouldn't have known how to interpret the things I was getting. But I think that, there are a lot of naturopaths and DAOMs and even MDs in the space that aren't charging astronomical amounts of money.
Right.
If you can find a clinic who has, I don't know how, I guess you have PAs or nurses that help people
Yeah,
understand.
a mixture of
How do you do
nurse
it?
practitioners, PAs, MDs, DOs. Every location is a little bit different, but they're all, at the end of the day, everything that we do on the functional medicine side and biohacking side, they didn't learn any of it in school. You know, so it's regardless if it's an MD, DO, NP, they're all going to these courses. Accredited. Like A4M, AMMG, going to the different conferences, listening to other doctors, listening to their case studies, which obviously at the Biohacker Expo, there's going to be doctors up there talking about their different case studies. Dr. Davis did that last year, talking about all his different case studies with patients being exposed to toxins and how it is truly the root cause to most diseases. So, until you actually start listening to these other medical providers and their stories and their case studies, you won't really understand it. you have to have someone else to kind of, as a medical provider, you have to have someone else guide you based on their experiences. So
That's so true.
yeah, I'm hoping with the whole RFK Jr., if they confirm him into that role, I'm hoping that they start running actual real clinical studies on a lot of the stuff we do. Because if we have true validation behind it, I mean, at that point, we're changing the course of medicine.
Well, I also think it doesn't have to be that complicated. I think that what can happen is that they can change the restrictions on speech about what it is that these things do. There are
Mm,
so many studies that demonstrate the effectiveness, but they're not allowed to say. The bottles and the labels and the advertising. Google shut me down for promoting a health conference.
it's crazy.
They said I can't advertise about health.
Wow.
I appealed it and they shut me down twice because they said education is fine. But because I have biohacking vendors in the room and then I'm supporting them, Google won't let me put search ads in search results because they say it's speculative. And that's a matter of speech. These are all FDA cleared. These are not dangerous products. I don't have anything at the event that's dangerous.
Right.
The FDA doesn't think anything at my event is dangerous. It's all been cleared.
Yeah.
The approved label is about money.
Right.
And so all they have to do is change policy for us to be more effective in what we offer.
Yeah. It's I've been recently on social media. I've heard there was actually a podcast with Joe Rogan and Mark Zuckerberg talking about how the government was making Meta censor a lot of these things.
Right.
And for me, it's just like, why? You know, it's really
Money.
money. Yeah.
And the funniest part of that interview to me was when they were talking about Mark's knee surgery. And
Mm.
Rogan asked him if he had tried peptides. And he's like, no, my doctor didn't recommend that. I didn't do it. And Rogan laughed at him. He goes, you don't like healing? He's like, I'm good with my doctor. And it just goes to show that money isn't necessarily how someone accesses the truth of what can heal the body.
Right.
Zuckerberg has all the money he needs to
Right.
do whatever he wants to
He
do.
can make his own peptides.
He could.
For real.
And he's not a believer in these therapies because he's not reading the science. The
Right.
science is there. This is not speculative.
And Joe Rogan's the complete opposite. I mean, he's
Yeah.
like, he is a biohacker.
Yeah.
For years, he's always believed in the stuff that
But
we
he's
do.
working with legitimate doctors at Ways to Well.
Right.
He's not doing anything on his own. Every time you hear biohacking in the media, they always describe it as something self-experimental. And that's not what's happening. Rogan's not experimenting with his body.
Right.
He's engaging in structured hormesis. He's doing cold plunge followed by heat followed by cold plunge. He's taking peptides specific to what he needs. He cycles in and out of things.
Right.
Everything he's doing is with doctor supervision.
Yeah.
It's not experimental.
And it's personalized to the individual because someone like Joe Rogan, he's doing the comprehensive blood work, the blood work that your regular doctor in the allopathic world doesn't do. Right? They're looking at the micronutrients deficiencies. So when they're biohacking with certain supplements, that's because there's a deficiency that's been tested. So and people they don't understand that. A lot of doctors that are formally trained as family doctors and stuff, they don't know this stuff. So the first go to is that doesn't work. Hold on one second. Our bodies need nutrients just for it to function. My heart needs electrolytes for it to even pump and have its own electrical activity in the heart. So these are, and when I first started doing IV drips and putting the different nutrients in there, the calcium, the magnesium, the potassium, I started looking at looking at the boxes that we were using of medications. It's like, these are the same medications that we're using for emergency cardiac arrest patients and whatnot. And when you start thinking about it, it's like, oh man, I got a patient who's hyperkalemic, and I give calcium gluconate. This is the same calcium that goes into the IV bag. Magnesium sulfate for preeclamptic seizures. Adenosine monophosphate. I'm giving this to a patient with a cardiac dysrhythmia. So the traditional system is actually using a lot of these nutrients, but then they try to bash the doctors that are utilizing it when it's out of the emergency environment. So, but it shows you that your body does need these things. And when there's an imbalance, you can go into an emergency crisis, medical emergency crisis. So this is, Sandy, I'll tell you, your story is one story that always sticks to me, because it's like, you didn't just help yourself. You decided to actually do something with your experience and bring it to the masses. And the Biohacker Expo, this is something that if people haven't been, they have to come to this. There's a lot of greatness that's happening there. And not only that, the energy, just when you walk in, it's just like so zen. And
I'm all about the vibe.
last year people were dancing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Did
Well,
they have
one
the
of the things that I think people have a misconception of when they think of biohackers is they kind of think of the typical tech bro, but that's not who comes to these things. These events are full of people like me, people who have overcome something painful in their lives, even if they've just gotten a little taste. In fact, I think that's who benefits the most from coming to an expo like mine. I put it together so that, I spent $97,000 in my first year to heal my brain, and that was absurd. I should have never done that. I didn't have to do it, but it was out of desperation that I got anywhere close to that. And so what I've done is I've created these experiences in the room for people to try, and so they can see what works for them. And if it doesn't work for them, then they can have the knowledge from the talks to find out how to go deeper, to figure out how to find the answer. It shouldn't take anyone 6 months. Actually, 6 months is a quick period of time for figuring out something is mold. It's usually 2 to 3 years. And people are typically in a very desperate state by the time they consider mold could be a thing. But if you come to an environment like this, you get exposed to the ideas behind what it means to be healthy.
Right.
Really healthy.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't think 4 years ago, I didn't know what joy was. I didn't know what it felt like to feel good. I was accomplished. I was driven. I loved my life. But I wasn't happy. I loved all my choices. I loved the impact. I loved what I was doing. I didn't love myself. And I was stressed. My first thing I thought it was burnout. I think so many people can relate to this, that life can feel like drudgery for people sometimes. But you know what? That might just be sugar in your brain. It might have been my oatmeal for breakfast for 45 years of my life. It might not be the individual themselves. It might be a host. It might be a parasite. It might be a fungus. It might be bacteria gone awry. We think that our brains are designed to give answers. So if we feel down, the brain says, I must be depressed. It attaches the I to that.
Yeah.
But my story is a testament that it wasn't me.
Right.
I didn't feel those things. I had something in my body that was triggering those feelings. And once I got it out, like the first time I heard someone say she experienced bliss in her life, I thought she was lying. I didn't think it was a real emotion.
Wow.
But now I know.
Yeah.
And I want everybody to know that they can feel good. That's our birthright.
Yeah. And this is the power of looking under the hood, seeing exactly how your body's performing, what's going on, what are the deficiencies, or how you said, maybe something's living inside of you that shouldn't. And that happens a lot.
Right?
Yeah. Wow. Wow. So what else can we expect at the conference, at the expo?
We're if you have a well-behaved dog, you can bring it.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. We've had quite a few dogs here at the podcast, in the podcast room. People bring them.
My dog is my best biohack.
Nice.
He gets me walking 4 or 5 times a day.
Who
And
walks
he
who?
gives me love. Exactly. Exactly. Miguel Bertinati from Medical Health Institute.
Okay.
He's going to talk about biohacking his dog.
Oh, nice.
So we're going to have vendors focus on what they do for pets.
That's
too.
become a lot more popular.
It is.
I was talking to Christian with STEM Regen,
Mhm.
and they have a new supplement product coming out for pets.
Yeah.
Pulse, the PEMF, they have a whole device for pets. And honestly,
Red light therapy for
red
pets.
light therapy. And the more I look at it, honestly, I think people are more willing to do stuff for their pets than for themselves.
They
It's
are.
scary,
So
but
I'll get them
yeah,
in to figure out how to keep their dogs alive longer, and then maybe they'll figure out how to live longer
right.
too.
Especially if the dog outlives them. So this is awesome. This is awesome. So Sandy, as we wrap up here, your story is very powerful. If there's someone listening, any of the doctors that tune into our podcast, or any of the consumers that are listening, and they resonate with your message, what is one thing that you can leave them off with?
I think the best place to start with biohacking or health, living a healthy lifestyle, is asking yourself what you can stop doing. My cousin called me the other day and he said, I have a little brain fog. Should I take lion's mane? And I said, you should stop eating at McDonald's. He goes, I know.
Right.
2 weeks later, he's down 16 pounds.
Wow.
The greatest gift I'm ever given is when someone takes action on their health and they feel better,
Yeah.
right? So he took my advice. And in 2 weeks, he's down 16 pounds. Feels better because
Amazing.
he took out a poison. So what's one thing you can stop doing?
Right.
I think that's the big takeaway.
And that can easily make you feel a lot better. So it's not necessarily what you can supplement yourself with. Sometimes it's that one thing that you just have to eliminate.
Yeah.
Amazing. So Sandy, where can people find you?
Easy. Biohackerexpo.com.
Awesome. And they can buy tickets there too?
They can.
All
Yeah,
right.
I hope to see everyone there.
Amazing. So Sandy, it was a pleasure having you on the podcast. It's going to be exciting. I'm excited for the big expo. It's going to be a good time. Good time.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for listening to another episode of a Healthy Point of View podcast. Again, I'm your host, Sam Tejada. Make sure you like, share, subscribe. All the links are down below. You can check out Sandy Martin and the Biohacker Expo there. And if you have any questions, just reach out to us. We're not difficult to get a hold of. Until then, we'll see you for the next one.